Welcome to Module 6, Preventing Child Abuse and Neglect of Infants and Toddlers in Early Childhood Settings. This module addresses how child caregivers can recognize, appropriately address, and prevent child abuse and neglect of infants and toddlers in child care. The module is divided to allow completion in 2 separate online sessions. The first session provides an overview of child abuse and neglect and addresses physical and emotional neglect, as well as abusive head trauma and shaken baby syndrome. The second session addresses physical and sexual abuse, explains the caregiver's responsibility as a mandated reporter, and presents ways to prevent child abuse and neglect in early childhood settings. The sessions should be completed in sequential order for an optimal learning experience. You are presently in Session 1, which will be about 1.5 hours in length. You will need to complete Session 2 at a later time to complete the entire module. The content of this module is based on the 3rd edition of Caring for Our Children, which is the definitive source on best practice in health and safety in early care and education settings. Links to the standards used in the development of the content in this training session are available on the Environmental Health Module page of the Building a Healthy Start website at www.adph.org/healthystart. All of the Caring for Our Children standards are available online at www.nrckids.org. It is important to understand the difference between standards, guidelines, and regulations when discussing best practice in child care. This knowledge will help you to better incorporate the information that you receive today into your daily practice. A standard is a statement that defines a goal of practice. It is usually based on scientific evidence. It is stronger than a recommendation or a guideline, but differs from a regulation because compliance is not necessarily required for legal operation. Examples of national standards include Caring for Our Children and the ASTM International Standards for Product Safety, such as their crib safety standards. A guideline is a statement of advice or instruction. A guideline is issued from an organization with acknowledged professional standing and usually comes from a perceived need for such guidance. One example of guidelines is the Choose My Plate campaign from the United States Department of Agriculture, also known as the USDA. A regulation, however, is a standard or guideline that becomes a requirement for legal operation. A regulation comes from an agency with governmental or official authority and is accompanied by enforcement activity. Examples of regulations include the Alabama Department of Human Resources, licensing standards, and the Health Department's food safety regulations. Because creating regulations is a lengthy legal process, regulations, although they still must be followed, may become outdated and no longer represent best practice. Please remember that the content of this module is based on the best practice standards published in Caring for Our Children. These standards may or may not have been adopted as regulations in Alabama. Caregivers should be familiar with state and local child care regulations and operate in compliance with such regulations. Let's begin with an overview of child abuse and neglect as it relates to infants and toddlers. There is no one commonly accepted definition. Each state has its own definitions of child abuse and neglect, and these definitions are based on standards set by federal law. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, as amended in 2010, defines child abuse and neglect as, at a minimum, any recent act or failure to act on the part of a parent or caretaker which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or an act of failure to act which presents an imminent risk of serious harm. There are many forms of child abuse, including neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. Neglect is identified in over 3/4 of abuse cases. Although any of the forms of child maltreatment may be found separately, they may also occur in combination. Every year, more than 3 million reports of child abuse are made in the United States. This averages out to a report of child abuse being made every 10 seconds. As a single report can include multiple children, These combined reports involve more than 6 million children. For example, in a recent year, approximately 3.9 million children were subject to an investigated report. Approximately one-fifth of these, or 679,000 children, were identified as victims. During the same year, an estimated 1,640 children died from child abuse and neglect. Most children who died were under 5 years. The greatest risk is to infants and toddlers. These facts convey the big picture in our nation. However, rates of child abuse may vary by state, geographic region, and community. Within a given area or community, rates may also vary based on demographic differences. For example, communities with a high rate of poverty and substance abuse often have a higher incidence of domestic violence, including child abuse. Caregivers have an important role in preventing child abuse and neglect both at home and in child care settings. With appropriate training, caregivers can recognize signs of abuse and neglect early and report suspected child abuse and neglect to the appropriate agency. Caregivers can also assist families in assessing appropriate intervention. A variety of risk factors can affect a person's ability to care for children and may trigger child abuse and neglect. Mental or emotional disorders such as depression, uncontrolled temper or mood swings, or poor physical health, including chemical or hormonal imbalances, may decrease an adult's ability to nurture and care for their children and can trigger abuse. Some parents lack an understanding of child development and have unrealistic expectations of child behavior. Very young parents and parents who are raising children alone and without regular support from family and friends are also at higher risk for abusive behavior. The structure of the home environment can also present a higher risk for child abuse and neglect. For example, a mother and young child living with a boyfriend who is not the father of the child may present a higher risk for child abuse. Drug and alcohol abuse by the parent or other individual in the home can lead not only to child abuse, but to other forms of family violence. Family violence affects children both emotionally and physically. Spousal abuse often escalates and leads to abuse of the children. Many abusing parents were themselves abused in childhood and may not know how to break the cycle. Child abuse and neglect can occur in any family, regardless of socioeconomic status. However, extreme poverty is often both the background and the trigger. A parent with an unstable or low-paying job and financial difficulty is particularly susceptible to stress. The loss of a job, foreclosure on the home, or calls from creditors may push the parent over the edge. In addition to parental risk factors, some children are at higher risk for child abuse and neglect. Children at a higher risk include infants, especially those with colic and inconsolable crying, and toddlers who are very active are at a higher risk for abuse. Another higher risk group is children with special needs, such as hearing and visual impairment, a physical disability, or a chronic health condition, or with mental, behavioral, or emotional issues. Caring for a child with intensive needs may overwhelm parents and affect their ability to cope in stressful situations. Unfortunately, some children are unwanted or unplanned due to unplanned pregnancies, blended families, or other circumstances. These children also are at high risk of becoming victims of child abuse or neglect. In Part 2, we will look at neglect, the most common form of child abuse. Child neglect is the failure to meet a child's basic needs, such as food, shelter, clothing, a safe environment, and health care, which puts the child at risk for harm. Neglect may represent failure by the parent, the community, or society to care for young children. Neglect of infants and toddlers may include physical neglect, medical neglect, inadequate supervision, and emotional neglect. In its most severe form, neglect results in physical harm or death. There are several forms of physical neglect. Abandonment includes deserting a child without arranging for reasonable care and supervision, Refusing to take custody of a child who is under your care and repeatedly leaving a child in another's custody for days or weeks at a time. Nutritional neglect is failing to provide enough healthy food and drink, resulting in a child being undernourished or repeatedly hungry for long periods of time. Failure to meet a child's nutritional needs may be evidenced by poor or stunted growth. An example of clothing neglect might include a child who does not have clothes that are appropriate to their weather, such as warm clothes in the winter, or who does not have shoes that fit properly. Hygiene neglect is failing to ensure adequate personal hygiene, including bathing, hair care, and toothbrushing. Hygiene neglect may also be indicated if a child repeatedly arrives in unclean clothing. Neglect may involve disregard for a child's safety, inadequate supervision of a child, and exposing a child to unsafe environments or situations, such as allowing a child to play near a busy street or in high-crime areas, place the child at risk of physical harm. Leaving a child with an inappropriate caregiver, such as a family member or other adult under the influence of drugs and/or alcohol, is included in this category as well. Leaving young children unsupervised in a vehicle, even for a few minutes, also represents neglect. Caregivers who see children on a regular basis or a daily basis may observe signs of physical neglect. For example, any parent may occasionally forget to bring a jacket or change of clothes for their child. However, a parent who routinely fails to provide appropriate clothing, such as a warm jacket in winter, may be neglecting the child's care. Likewise, a child may occasionally arrive at child care with unwashed hair or soiled clothing. Neglect may be suspected if the child routinely has poor hygiene, including inadequate bathing and hair care and dirty clothing. You may also suspect neglect if a child often has neglected sores, cuts, or diaper rash. Infants and toddlers eat small amounts of food and eat frequently throughout the day. It is expected that children will be hungry when it's time for the meal or snack. However, children with insufficient food and nutrition may show signs of extreme hunger. This hunger may be more apparent when children arrive after being away for the weekend. The extreme hunger signs may be accompanied by failure to grow and develop or loss of weight. Caregivers who make home visits may observe other signs of physical neglect. Home visits provide opportunity to observe parent and child interactions as well as the child's environment. While talking with the parent, notice if and how the parent supervises the child and whether the environment appears safe. For example, the presence of tobacco, nicotine, or alcohol products, household cleaners and chemicals, and weapons in the child's reach would be unsafe. Other members of the household may also be present during the home visit. Be aware of the presence of an adult under the influence of drugs and/or alcohol. All children need nurturing from consistent caregivers. However, parents who do not take responsibility for their own children may rely on various family members and friends to care for their children. This unstable pattern may be suspected by a lack of consistent and predictable adults who drop off and pick up the child at child care. Child abuse and neglect can occur in any family, regardless of education, socioeconomic level, race, or culture. However, extreme poverty may prevent parents from meeting basic needs. Caregivers must be careful to consider observed signs in context. For example, a child may wear clothing inappropriate for the weather, unclean clothing, or ragged clothing. An appropriate response to this situation would be to tactfully and gently discuss the clothing concern with the parent and assess the response. You may learn that the parent is in need of clothing or other resources. You may then share information with the parent about clothing banks or other donations. If the child wears unclean clothing, find out if the family has access to and money for laundry facilities. In another example, you might observe that a child always arrives looking like she slept in her clothes. This may not be neglect. A single mother who cannot be late for her job may let her child sleep in play clothes so that it takes less time to get ready in the morning. You may notice that she always hugs and kisses her child, and the child appears clean, healthy, and happy. Signs that appear as neglect may also indicate a cultural difference or undeveloped parenting skills. For example, a child may be unclean if the family feels that weekly bathing or even less frequent bathing is acceptable. Some parents believe that a child should not bathe or wash the hair if the child has a cold or even a runny nose. Poor hygiene may also occur if the home lacks indoor plumbing and water. Your response to this situation may be to discuss the hygiene concern with the parent as a health concern. Based on the response, you may want to gently educate the parent about child health and the importance of regular hygiene. If the parent indicates that regular baths are not desired or possible, then suggest other ways to maintain hygiene, such as washing with a cloth. If the parent lacks facilities for regular bathing, such as a bathtub, assist in assessing community resources if needed. Medical neglect is failure to provide appropriate health and dental care for a child when financial or other health care resources are available. The presence of untreated sores and cuts and poor oral health, including decay of primary or baby teeth, may indicate failure to seek timely and appropriate care for a serious problem that a reasonable person would recognize as needing professional attention. Failure to provide documentation of current immunization or information about the child's regular doctor when requested may indicate a lack of preventive medical attention, such as well child checks and regular dental exams. Every child needs a medical home, that is, a regular doctor, nurse practitioner, or other healthcare professional who provides medical and healthcare services on a continual basis. Medical neglect also includes delaying or refusing recommended medical attention for illness, injury, and identified special needs. Children with identified special needs may be at higher risk because parents may not want to admit that their child has a disability or to acknowledge the extent of the disability. Although this denial may be a coping mechanism, it is still medical neglect. Signs that appear as medical neglect may also indicate poverty or lack of knowledge. For example, a toddler may have oral health issues, including obvious dental decay or apparent pain when chewing food. One approach is to discuss the concern with the parent and assess the response. Some parents do not realize the importance of primary or baby teeth to their child's health. Find out if the parent has a regular dentist and if they have dental insurance or the ability to pay for the necessary treatment. If appropriate, assist the parent in identifying local dental services that accept Medicaid or have a sliding fee schedule and encourage them to schedule and keep the dental appointment. You may also suspect medical neglect if a child has recurring signs of illness or has cuts and scrapes that do not appear to be healing well. Gently discuss your concern with the parent and ask if the child has a regular doctor or clinic. If yes, then emphasize and explain the importance of regular health care and suggest the child be taken to the doctor. Find out if the parents have transportation issues or other barriers to accessing medical care. If the child does not have a regular doctor or clinic, then offer assistance in identifying and assessing appropriate care. You may also refer the parent to resources if insurance is needed. Infants and toddlers need love, attention, and nurturing from caring adults for optimal social and emotional development. In Part 3, we will look at risk factors for and signs of emotional abuse and neglect. Emotional abuse and neglect is a pattern of behavior by parents or caregivers that can seriously interfere with a child's cognitive, emotional, psychological, and social development. This form of abuse and neglect may be associated with very young parents who have undeveloped parenting skills, as well as with child caregivers who lack appropriate training and skills on child development and behavior management. Adults who were emotionally abused and neglected themselves as children may not have the necessary skills to nurture young children. Children with special needs may be less able to do things independently and rely more on adults for care. These circumstances make them more likely to be neglected by adults. Emotional abuse and neglect may involve both action and lack of action by the parent or caregiver. For example, a a parent or caregiver may reject or ignore a child's need for attention and affection, such as letting infants or toddlers cry without attempting to soothe them. The child may be isolated from normal interaction with family members and other adults, or confined with limited freedom of movement. Examples might include leaving an awake infant in a crib or confining a toddler to a bedroom for long periods. Infants and toddlers need regular interaction and nurturing throughout the day. Criticizing, name-calling, shaming, and ridiculing the child are other abusive actions. This form of abuse may also include terrorizing a child. Threats of harm or danger to the child or to a child's loved one, including pets or favorite toys, are abusive. Bullying by older children who might threaten damage to a cherished stuffed toy is another form of emotional abuse. Many adults are unfamiliar with typical child development and therefore may have inappropriate expectations of child behavior. For example, a toddler should not be expected to sit quietly for more than a few minutes. To threaten a toddler with punishment for squirming or talking is inappropriate. Sometimes the emotional abuse is accompanied by extreme forms of punishment, such as confinement of the child in a dark closet. Exposing a child to domestic violence is also emotionally abusive. Furthermore, domestic violence often escalates and may result in physical harm to the child. The various forms of child abuse and neglect often occur in combination. Children who have experienced physical or sexual abuse are likely to also suffer from emotional abuse and neglect. Signs of emotional abuse and neglect may be subtle, especially in very young children. Caregivers may observe changes in a young child's emotions or behavior, or a lack of appropriate social and emotional development. These signs may include lack of eye contact, detachment or being withdrawn, and sadness. Some children might display aggressiveness, while others indicate neediness and clinginess. Emotional abuse and neglect, such as exposure to domestic violence, often triggers nightmares. All children need acceptance, love, encouragement, discipline, consistency, stability, and positive attention from both parents and caregivers. Here are some ways you can promote optimal social and emotional development. Apologize to a child when you are wrong. If you lose your temper and say something in anger that wasn't meant to be said, apologize. Children need to know that adults can admit when they are wrong. Show children respect. Don't call a child names or attach labels to a child. When a child has challenging behavior, address the behavior that needs correcting and model appropriate behavior management techniques such as redirection. Talk with parents about effective behavior management techniques, since some parents are unaware of realistic expectations for children and appropriate discipline. Compliment children frequently, such as when they try new skills, accomplish even small tasks, or exhibit desired behavior, such as saying, "please." Caring for children can be stressful, and it may be best to walk away from a situation if you feel you are losing control. First, make sure the children are safe and supervised. Then, isolate yourself in another room for a few minutes. Other ways to walk away include counting to 10 or 20 before you say anything, asking for help from another adult, or taking a few deep breaths before reacting. Encourage families to get help if needed. Parents may need resources such as food, shelter, or job training, and intervention for families at risk for emotional abuse is more effective if the immediate basic needs are met. Resources may be available through local child protection service agencies, community centers, churches, physicians, mental health facilities, and schools. Now, let's look at forms of physical abuse. Remember, even if the adult did not intend to cause harm, any reckless or potentially dangerous action that results in injury is physical abuse. Serious traumatic brain injury in young children is largely the result of abuse. Abuse is the third leading cause of head injuries after falls and motor vehicle crashes. Abusive head trauma, or AHT, refers to head and brain injury resulting from abuse of infants and young children. The term AHT includes shaken baby syndrome, but also includes injury caused by other abusive actions. AHT can be caused by shaking an infant or toddler by the arms, legs, chest, or shoulders. It can also be caused by direct blows to the head, including slapping or hitting, dropping or throwing a child, and shoving a child into a wall or other object. When someone shakes a child, the child's head may move uncontrollably. This violent movement pitches the child's brain back and forth within the skull. The brain may strike the inside of the skull, causing bruising and bleeding of the brain. The damage can be even greater when a shaking episode ends with an impact, such as hitting a wall or a crib mattress. AHT can also be caused by striking a child's head, slapping a child's face, or dropping a child. AHT is the most common cause of death and accounts for the most long-term disability in infants and young children due to physical abuse. AHT often results in permanent neurologic disability, including mental retardation, autism spectrum disorder, speech and learning disabilities, behavioral problems, cerebral palsy, paralysis, seizures, hearing loss, blindness, and permanent vegetative state. It only takes a few seconds of shaking or one blow to cause permanent neurological damage or even death. Young infants are at greatest risk of death from shaking. An infant's head and neck are especially vulnerable to injury because the head is large and the neck muscles are still weak. In addition, the infant's brain and blood vessels are fragile and easily damaged by shaking, jerking, and jolting motions. When an infant cries for hours, you may feel like crying too. Inconsolable crying is often a trigger for AHT. Therefore, young infants, especially those with colic or who have special needs, are at greatest risk. Both parents and caregivers can learn ways to console infants and ways to manage their own stress. An effective method of consoling infants is the 5 S's, which was developed by Dr. Harvey Karp. These techniques initiate a natural calming effect. Shushing sounds such as shh, shh, or white noise such as the hum of a vacuum cleaner or fan helps calm some babies. The rhythmic sounds imitate the continual whooshing sound made by the mother's blood flow during pregnancy. It may help to place the infant on his side or stomach while you are holding him. This placement may help the infant burp and digest food. Remember to always put the infant on his back when placing in the crib to sleep. The action of sucking has a calming reflex for infants. If the infant is hungry, let her breastfeed or bottle feed. It may also help to give the infant a pacifier or your clean finger to suck on. Some infants suck their thumbs or fingers to calm themselves. Safe sleep. In child care settings, swaddling is not necessary or recommended. Appropriate infant clothing and/or an infant sleeping bag can safely improve temperature control without the possible serious health outcomes of swaddling, such as SIDS and hip disease. Swinging gently is effective if you walk with the infant in a swaying motion, swing the infant gently, or rock in a chair. These actions help duplicate the constant motion the infant felt in the womb. Infants and toddlers with special needs may also be at a higher risk for AHT. These children may cry frequently because of discomfort and because they cannot communicate their needs. Parents and caregivers can more easily become stressed and overwhelmed by the care required for these children. Also, parents may become frustrated by challenging behaviors related to the child's disability, such as the head banging that can occur in autism spectrum disorders, and may respond harshly or inappropriately. Remember that AHT is 100% preventable. Caregivers can help prevent AHT by increasing awareness by parents and other caregivers of the potential dangers of shaking. Caregivers should get to know the children in their care, as well as getting to know their parents. As you connect with and understand individual children, you will learn effective ways to soothe and console them. Be aware that adults can become overwhelmed when caring for children, especially if there are other stressful factors in the environment or social situation. Caregivers can learn ways to respond to and manage the stress and encourage and assist families to get needed help. This concludes Session 1 of Preventing Child Abuse and Neglect of Infants and Toddlers in Early Childhood Settings. In order to finish Module 6, be sure to complete the second session on physical and sexual abuse, your legal responsibilities for reporting, and ways to prevent child abuse and neglect within early childhood settings. To help prevent child abuse and neglect, get to know the children in your care and be aware of individual characteristics. This awareness and connection will help you recognize when a child's physical or social behavior is different and may alert you to possible situations of abuse or neglect. Remember, trust your instincts. If you think that something is wrong, then observe the facts, take notes, and make a report. Remember that you do not have to present documentation and evidence. Reports are made for suspected abuse and neglect. Thank you for your participation in this training session. The training module team may follow up with you in 2 months to see how you have used this information. A short post-training survey may be sent to you at the email address you provided during registration.